So hi everyone, thank you for joining us in this lovely city of Detroit. Thank you everyone at home also for joining virtually. I'm Simon Chammah, and I will be presenting today together along with Eyal about Shore, a framework for pipelines. So a little about myself. I'm managing the platform team in Autodesk in Tel Aviv. Our squad is part of the development enablement group in Autodesk. Father of two, I love crossfitting and traveling around the world.
Hi, I'm Eyal Mor, tech lead in the platform engineering team in Autodesk, Tel Aviv, a tech enthusiast, and other than that, love playing music and some anime. So if you want to talk about that later. Again, we have other core members that couldn't be here in person, so we want to make sure they get the spotlight again. It takes more than two to build something awesome.
So what will we be talking about today? First, we will give some background about the deployment journey in Autodesk for the past years. We will then cover the problems and challenges we encountered in this journey, focusing on pipelines development. From there, we will jump directly to Shore. What is it, including all the tech details and a demo. And finally, today is a big event for us. We are open sourcing Shore to the community. So a little background about Autodesk. Autodesk has now grown into more than 13,000 employees all across the world, out of which 4,000 are software engineers, developing about 98 products across 9 industries. This is the customer we need to support. Each of these teams has specific requirements. On top of that, there's also compliance we need to enforce, starting with SOC 2 on all our cloud offerings through GDPR, and even FedRAMP moderate designation on some of the offerings. So the mission that was set by Autodesk Development Enablement Department was to increase developer productivity by 100x. But what does it mean? Basically, it means to make the life and the experience of every developer in the company simple and easy in every way we can. We want our developers to focus solely on delivering the best products to our external customers around the world. So how can we achieve that? By building an extendable, secure, and compliant cloud-native platform. A single common platform for the company, built with these core principles, API first and consistency, that can maximize developer productivity. To the problem. So we all know how everyone starts. We take the Spinnaker UI, write some spell expression, make the system work. Everything works well for 10 minutes until you need more customizability. Then after receiving a set of business requirements we needed our platform to support, we created tooling that automated the creation and provisioning of deployment and delivery pipelines. Then as we scaled, and more customers onboarded, more features and bug fixes were getting released very frequently. Having more than 10 developers contributing different capabilities and collaborating over one growing repo became challenging. More than that, releasing many new versions of each pipeline and each custom tool without breaking the platform was very hard. We were defining our pipeline as code, but not treating them as software. How about testing? It became increasingly difficult to test every use case combination. We then just realized it was just a bunch of tools serving some purposes, not a coherent platform. In order to scale, we needed to change the way we think and treat pipelines. So we understand we needed to enable our platform developers to move fast by providing them guidelines, tooling, and common libraries. This will allow teams to scale their capabilities independently and iterate quickly. Those are the building blocks of a framework.
Cool. Thank you, Simon, for identifying the problem.
Let's see if we can solve it.
Yeah. So, to tackle the challenges we just brought up, we built Shore. So, what is Shore? Framework for pipeline development. Simple as that. Shore was built with a goal to make pipeline development a first-class citizen for software engineers. So a framework allows teams to focus on the business logic, usually. Shore was built to give that same experience when building pipelines, creating a new term, really, pipeline developers. For the more techie interested, the architecture slide now. Shore is built with Golang, which means it's easy to create binaries, pretty efficient on our CPUs usually. The project is internally separated into a command line layer and core layer. Command line is the bottom command line prompt there. It contains the the command line contains the logical interface for reading configuration files and passing them to the core. Shore core is the execution layer there in the middle. It deals with interfacing with a renderer and a backend. So Shore, to actually build the framework and get the libraries, we need to render something and output something and save it. Shore core deals with that. We're going to do a demo now, so you can really get a feel of what this actually means, because everything in the architecture is high level. We have some libraries, we have a renderer, but to really understand the feel of developing with Shore, you need to see it first. So without further ado, we're going to do a demo over Wi-Fi. So let's put this here and this here. Great. And can everyone see in the back? I hope everyone can see at home. I have no idea. So we start with a Spinnaker UI, as most people do. Now, I'm a new developer in the team. I need to fix a bug. I want to start developing. The lucky piece is I know how to start working with this because I learned how to use Shore. Like any other framework, there's a tutorial that tells me how to start, how to end my work. So let's jump into the project. Jumping into the project, I know how to start looking at this. I know that a Shore project starts with a main pipeline JSON file that defines my pipeline. Let's just check that it exists and not go into too much details. Let's increase here a bit and not update anything yet. Not here. Cool. So the file exists, and we're good with that for now. Now, I got a bug request, like just right now on my phone. Issue 256, a number parameter will fail the pipeline. What does that mean? Well, basically, the pipeline executes a cube job, runs it, echoes 1. I know it's riveting, of course. And then it deploys a nested pipeline or invokes a nested pipeline. Now, I know I need to fix this bug. Problem is, I see the word production here. If I start working on this pipeline, what will happen? Basically, I'll bring down production, and I get a call, and everyone will be upset. Let's not do that. Let's first set up our developer environment. So I can see from like my first short tutorials that params pipeline is the pipeline name that I give to all my pipelines. The params argument is passed from the render YAML. And here I can see the production name. Let's change that to I256, which is the issue we just got. And we will invoke 2 Shore commands. Shore render on the terminal. We can see it renders JSON. We can even pipe it through JQ to make it look nice. And we will run Shore save. So now, after going through Wi-Fi and hopefully hitting our Spinnaker instance, if I go back, I can see the nested I256 Shore demo pipeline popping up. Now, I can securely develop without breaking down a production, which is usually a nice thing to do. Okay, so now that I have a developer environment, let's start executing the pipeline and see the bug. So to execute a pipeline in Shore, I go to the exec YAML and look at the execution unit. I will just write Shore exec, which will send the parameters to the pipeline and application. Here I will change to I256, our developer environment, and execute that. And now it will execute and probably be okay because that's what was saved in the original repo. So no one saves bugs, hopefully. And we will go and reproduce the bug. So I know that the bug says an integer will break everything. Let's check. Good practice, usually. Check your bug report. And now if I wait a few seconds, I hope that everything breaks, and it did. So let's read real quick what happens. A container spec, containers cannot be handled, of type string. This is where Jedi training comes in. I know this is a type error. I put a string, worked, put an int, didn't work. Simple as that. Let's fix that problem. So going back to my pipeline, I look at where is run kube job stage defined. Now, the libraries really help me with that because the API literally says, run kube job. That's nice. Now, some good Samaritan already put the bug fix. I don't know who. But let's just use it. So I will run shore save now with the bug fix. The bug fix will take a parameter called echo1 from parameters, apply the two strings. So no matter what comes in, it will be stringified. Kubernetes can handle it. And then we wrap it in a spell expression. So we saved the pipeline with the fix. We can shore exec. And now, lo and behold, we will survive another day. Well, let it survive another day first. Cool. That fixed it. Now, switching back to my editor, this is the time I open a PR, said, I'm done, give me the next task. But if I open the PR now, Simon will tell me, stop, where are the tests? How do I know their fix will stay fixed forever, or as long as the pipeline still lives? That's where the end-to-end YAML comes in. So Shore is built with testing in mind. That's something that is a pillar of any framework. And Shore is no exception. E2E stands for end-to-end. It will be invoked with the test remote command. If we look at the end-to-end YAML, it contains a test suite with names for each test and assertions for each stage. We can also test outputs here, but we'll keep it simple with just status checks for now. So we can see the Good Samaritan also left us how to fix the next bug. But first, let's look at this. Someone left the original test. So we know the string always works. Let's uncomment this and change to I256. And now we can run a shore test remote. We will add two flags. We don't have time in our lives as developers, so we'll add a concurrency flag and some verbosity so we can see what's up, both in the terminal and in the UI. So we'll hit enter. We see it running concurrently. And if we switch back to Spinnaker, we see our two pipelines running. And now, when both pass, I can open the PR, and Simon will approve. Or maybe, hopefully. Cool. That's it. The live demo actually worked.
You want to see? You want to show me the cell?
Cool. Let's go back to the slides. So I wanted to note that this demo is super simplified, like the explain like I'm five scenario of it, but it really represents how we use Shore and Autodesk to build a platform. The idea of a framework is to make life simple. Having said that, there are so many other features that we didn't even cover yet that I really recommend you look into. I want to also show an example. So our colleagues in Autodesk talked about the platform. Here's an example pipeline that is generated by Shore, which is a multi-region, multi-env deployment with nested pipelines, parallels, all the shenanigans, made very easy with Shore, just automating the whole thing. So it becomes trivial to write something like this. Now, we're not even close to done with this project. In Autodesk, it serves us well in its current form, and we're good with that. But we believe that pipeline development and its evolution is not just here to stay, but here to evolve. And we believe that the frameworking and software development side of pipelines is something that it can be shared in the community and CNCF entirely. So what's in store for the future? Well, short term, we're going to do some improvements, prettier error messages. Whoever saw the errors inside, they're not that good yet, but the concepts are solid. But the long term, we want to actually add more pipeline runners and build a community around that so we can really have the same conversation no matter where you are and speak the same language, short save, short exec. And we want additional language support as well, so if JSON is not your groove, maybe we'll find something that does work for your team. Speaking previously on the CNCF, it's ever growing. So we do believe that it is important to at least consider adopting the framework, no matter where you are in the CNCF landscape, and see if you can involve with us. And if you want to know more, the framework has this morning been released open source. So you can search it in the Autodesk GitHub repo under the name Shore, or ask us for a DM and we'll send it to you. Via DM, we'll send you a link, or ask us later if you're here in person. And start asking questions in the discussion tab on GitHub. And with all that said and done, thank you for listening. And any questions? Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. So just to be clear, like the core component is a component that you deploy. Is that right?
So the core component is baked into the binary we just saw, the CLI, but in the diagram, I don't really touch into it because it's not explained like I'm 5 level. But you basically can take the core and embed it. That's what we're actually doing right now for the very complex scenarios. So we develop with the framework, and then take the JSON code and move it into an orchestrator that's higher level. That's why the core is independent from the CLI. Does that answer?
So if I wanted to adopt Shore for doing pipeline development, then I would only be interacting with the CLI to start with?
Most likely. You'll be interacting with the CLI, and I commend you for doing that. It'll be much nicer than trying to implement the core.
Sure.
We're still working on like the API design there. The CLI is solid.
And if I do Shore save, then how does that connect to Spinnaker directly?
So it currently uses the spin config file you have locally, so any way you already connect. We are working, I showed in the short term, we are working on a configuration language, like configuration layer, so you can bypass that and put whatever you want and automate. That's coming in, I think, like in a few months here. So we already have that problem with the spin config.
Thank you.
I think maybe you already answered this, but maybe not. There's a command line tool that I think people call the Spin CLI, and I'm curious if you're using any part of that for Shore.
So the backend is actually Spin CLI's library, stripped down from like many pieces, but we're trying to reuse as much as possible because there is no reason to rewrite something, and we want to contribute back any bug fixes we find. So we're not trying to replace anything. Spin CLI, I still use it to like find all the pipeline and stuff like that. It's not good for we didn't find it beneficial to manage your pipeline development in a developer-centric way. But if you're just looking at what pipelines you have, what applications you have, that's a great choice. Like, keep on using SpinCLI.
I guess I'm also curious about Sponnet and how much of Sponnet you're using.
So we started with Sponnet. We actually migrated away because of a few issues we had initially. We are going to open source the SpinLib.jSonnet that we built, and hopefully we'll merge them back in together. The biggest difference between them is builder pattern versus a composition pattern in terms of libraries, but go into GitHub, see if you like it. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to, consolidate the effort. Like, if there's something that we could do differently, the way we package Spin so that we publish a library that's consumable that you guys didn't have to do, didn't have to do as much as you did, or whatever stripping down you did, we could contribute back. So there'd be a way to publish a stripped down library. That's the kind of angle I'm looking at.
So just to clarify, what we did with Spin and to get Spin to work wasn't that hard. The real benefit of Shore is the pipeline developer experience. So it's not just Spinnaker. It's really like the whole API.
I think this is a very cool tool. I didn't mean to say otherwise. I actually have other higher level questions about, like, what about being able to run a pipeline in more of a dry run mode, or being even more paranoid about sort of release cadence, and you've done your due diligence to make your PR, and if you're very lucky it gets approved, but then as you go to impose it on the rest of the world, there are some risks there, and are you, what are you doing to mitigate that? And maybe that's what you were talking about with using the core as a separate thing and other orchestration, but that stuff, I think that would also be very valuable to try to open source if you could.
So you're completely right, by the way, about the mocking and like the risks. Well, in any case, whatever you use in your life has risks when you put like a framework out, or like you can create risks. The dry one is something we're talking about. It is a big problem to solve, and I think it's a conversation we can have on a GitHub issue. If you have any idea how to solve it for Spinnaker specifically, I would love to like touch base on that.
Could you talk a bit about security, essentially? Like, how do you ensure, the right people are, executing, and where is your security, basically?
Yeah, so honestly, we leverage the security of the system we're using. We're not trying to solve security at all. We impose security on pipelines via libraries. So like your deployment is secured, that's what we do in Autodesk. But the security, we're talking about like RBAC, IAM, whatever, or in Spinnaker's case, let's say Azure LDAP groups, that's what we use. We don't try to impose a security posture. You decide on the application how to secure it.
I see. So you're just inheriting, essentially, from Spinnaker?
Yeah. From any pipeline runner. Like, we don't want to impose something. Yeah. So Spinnaker in this case, of course.
Yeah, hi, thanks for open sourcing this, and yeah, looks great. I was wondering what plans do you have for growing a community or governance? Is the source that you're open sourcing, or are you planning to build a community, open sourcing the governance as well? Or?
So we are starting here by just talking to you after the in-person talk. That's the first step. And we want to understand what is the use case for other organizations, companies that may have these same issues, and what are the focus areas you have. From there, we'll probably go through these same open source steps, governance, but we can also join another organization. That's still unclear on what exactly we'll do. We first want to talk to the community here and see if there's like interest.
Great, thank you.
I'm just going to follow up on that question. So my thought was that it would be part of the Spinnaker community, but it seems like you are exploring other options too. So it may not necessarily be the Spinnaker community?
I think that each renderer backend, so it's like thinking of other tools, it doesn't have to be confined to one community. We can have communities contribute from anywhere. Spinnaker is the first one because it's the most important one for our use case, and I think it's a great community to start growing. But Spinnaker as a community is also working together with other communities, like the Argo community I've seen, Tekton is spoken here. So I don't think there's like a conflict. We'll start with the best community we can start with, which is here.
Hi guys, I'm Al from Google, and I'm really interested, well congratulations by the way, this is very cool, and thank you for open sourcing it. I'm really interested in the idea of having a standard pipeline, or a pipeline standard that's sort of independent of what you're calling pipeline runners, which are just different backend environments. I'm wondering how you got there, or were you trying to solve a specific issue in your environment? Do you have other frameworks beyond Spinnaker that are running?
Yeah, I can.
At Autodesk, or?
Yeah, you want to take that? Like.
Yeah, there was we did a research, actually did not find any framework solving these problems. And the more we scaled, and everyone was using automations and tooling, but there was no real, I think, solution.
Yeah, so when we did the research, we looked at other communities. The biggest problem we had was actually testing first. That's why we're so focused on that in this talk. Testing was really hard. So we just looked at other communities, and when I'm saying other, it's Jenkins, Argo, Tekton, everything that was available 2019.
Also, especially testing became important when we moved to operator pipelines, because it was operator pipelines for each use case run by 100 times every hour, because it was one pipeline for the whole company running the same thing. So every little change could break the whole company. This is why we were looking for testing to automate our iterations and our releases.
So taking from testing, we then looked at the common use cases that evolved from other pipeline runners, and then we saw most of them are actually very similar in design. Okay, you have a pipeline, you have a stage. In Tekton, it's called pipeline and task. Argo has its workflows with each component for the workflow. Very, very similar in design, but how you interact with them is super different. We kind of found out that you can unify at least that level of API for the developer. So less looking at the resource, creating one resource to rule them all, but more one tool to talk to them all kind of situation. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's no real answer to the question. I'm just interested in how you got there. So it's less of a sort of universal pipeline standard then, and more of a pipeline development environment that supports lots of different runners or backends.
Universal pipeline development standards.
Right. And the idea being that there will be an emerging class of pipeline developers who, if they are familiar with that environment, then can be successful across different backends as they journey through their career.
Yeah, I would love to see the evolution after people use this tool, because the evolution is way more interesting in like 2 to 3 years. If people start adopting, seeing the future of what they come up with, what's a real standard, what they think is how to interact, how to test. This is just a starting point, really.
Yeah. Cool, thank you.
Thank you for the question, by the way. I really enjoyed that.
Okay, then.
For good?
Thank you very much.
I think it's a wrap. Thank you.